As Martin mentioned, I am actually the group technical director for the Townley group of companies, which is working well already. For the Townley group of companies, we have a base, so Townley is actually based in Chester. We also have locations in Conway, Nottingham, which is where I'm from, and also further down south in Cambridge. And as of January, we're also positioning ourselves in the City of London as well. I've started the Pyronet business, which was predominantly an IT services and cybersecurity business back in 2005. Prior to that, I was working for the Pendragon Motor Group, largest motor group in the UK, and I was doing cybersecurity and IT services for the group at that point. But I must say that in the last 15 years or so, while I've been in cybersecurity, it has changed massively and rapidly over the last 2 years, particularly. Just to give you an idea and a flavour of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I have done presentations like this in lots of places, in lots of venues and for lots of different organisations. And what I'll be going through, a bit like it was titled, it's now actually 9 ways to steal your password as opposed to 8 as published, so you're getting 1 for free. So 9 ways to steal your password. It has a theme around it about showing what a hacker would typically do to steal passwords from you. So the point is, when I introduce myself to people, especially at networking events and things like that, I could use the quite boring technical director type job title, but I quite often like to say I'm an ethical hacker, because it always generates that interest of, okay, who hacks ethically then, and what is that about? So kind of explain what we do as, security experts, white hat hackers or ethical hackers, however you want to describe us. The way I like to put this is that a security tester or an ethical hacker has to think exactly like a malicious or criminal hacker thinks. They have to think and use all the same tools and techniques that a criminal hacker would use. But the idea behind that is you're employing somebody to try and preempt what could happen and how it could happen. So that if we were to find holes or situations where there are entry points into a system or network, to make you more resilient against those particular threats. So that's our job. And the way I once was working with a business where there'd been a breach. It was card details as well from a retail site, not a huge business, relatively modest, medium-sized business, but a retail company with several sites. They had an online presence, they had a hack, a breach, and card details were stolen. We went in to help with the investigation and deal with all of that. We found that actually the breach hadn't occurred, recently. It was 5 years ago. So 5 years previously, the breach had occurred. And what I like to kind of portray is that, if the only people ever that are trying to break into your systems are the bad guys, who's going to win? So if you've got nobody on your side trying to get in and trying to break in, then it's typical that the bad guys are going to get in first. And then that's going to be used for exploitation purpose rather than finding out what the issues are. So obviously then you've got the black hat and criminal hackers. They're the ones that are obviously trying to break in for malicious intent, usually financial gain. We'll go through a few examples of what we're seeing as modern, the latest threats and what is happening in businesses at the moment. But generally, these guys want to break in to steal money, usually. It's either money or data, and the only reason they steal data is because they want to extort or use that to gain money. So I sometimes go through all the different hacktivists and other groups, but I take it from the BCS side of it. You guys are going to be familiar with this. I wanted to try and get the good stuff, the exciting stuff, they're talking about the hacks in there. So phishing and spearfishing. So make this a little bit interactive. Can someone tell me the difference between what a traditional phishing would look like versus a spearfishing attack? What's the difference between those two?
They'll include your personal details to make you believe they're contacting you from Barclays or.
Yeah. So a spearfishing attack is much more targeted. They know details. They know who you are, who you work for, what you do. Probably know who your colleagues are, who's your manager, who you're a manager of. Spearfishing attacks, they know a lot more about you. Whereas, generically, going back several years, typically everyone got that email, that you'd somehow inherited some money from a long lost relative in Africa or something. You had to follow some instructions in order to get that. Non-believable stuff. Most of the time people would spot it a mile off and wouldn't fall for it. But what's happening is the spearfishing attacks, the ones that are more custom, tailored, individual for you, there's a bigger usually there's a bigger prize pot at the end of it, rather than, it's kind of caught, it can be named whaling as well. You have to one big whale, you have to one big target, as opposed to trying to to send it out to the masses and hope that you get a few little fish out of it. So the landscape has changed somewhat recently, because there are more intelligent spearfishing attacks coming out every day, and we can give you some examples of that. Another thing just to note is, they'll get this information from Meet the Team pages, LinkedIn profiles, Twitter, Facebook. There's a wealth of information online at the moment. And I'm not standing up, I have a Facebook account, I have a LinkedIn account. I'm not standing up here and going, oh, absolutely, you cannot have any social media presence, or you can't tell people on your website what you do, because that would be daft. The idea is, as a business, you want to be transparent to your clients, you want to be known for what you do and how you do it. What I am saying is, be aware that everyone knows that. So you have to know that some people, I've heard some people when they get a phishing email, they go, how did they know that? How did they know that was my managing director? Well, it's on Company's House. How did they know I managed that? Well, it's on LinkedIn. So it's just an appreciation of that information is all out there, and not to be naive enough to think that it isn't and they can't use that against you. I've got a bit of, because the internet's a bit flaky, even on 4G tether, I have got some videos of some of the demonstrations that I was going to do live, and I'm going to talk you through some of these demonstrations. So this one, firstly, is a spearfishing attack. I saw a phishing attack which looked pretty good. By show of hands, who uses Office 365? Any Office 365 users in the room? Probably about 50% of the room. When using Office 365, you can use a method of encrypting an email. So this is a genuine Office 365 encrypted email. You send it to a recipient. They can go to sign in or use a one-time passcode to retrieve the email and read the email. When they sign in or retrieve the one-time passcode, it will give them access to that email. Okay. Yeah, that's that. I kind of go through all the technique that's used for Office 365 generally, and how that's done. Just move it forward a little bit. We're not bothered too much about seeing the email. Okay, whereas this email, which looks identical to the previous one, is a phishing email that we created. Now it downloads a HTML file, okay? It doesn't send you to a phishing link, which means that IDS and things like that won't detect it straight off the bat. When they run that, this desktop app, this is actually locally on your computer. Again, not hit the web at all yet, so IDS won't detect it. You put in a username and password and hit login. It then posts your username and password, just one line, posts that to a web server that we're in control of as the hackers, and it actually signs you out of your Office 365 account to make it look like it was genuine. On the hacker servers, so this is Kali Linux, which we use a lot for, penetration testing and hacking. And if we now go to a file where we've captured the credentials, we can see the username and password that's been put in that landing page that they've been landed on. Now, this is the thing. That is, from a phishing perspective, as believable as you're going to get it. And it's also very difficult for typical systems to detect that behavior as well. I've shown this to people in our tech support team, and they didn't spot a difference between the two. If you look at the two emails exactly side by side, you won't tell a difference. If you click on each of the HTML files, you will see a difference, because Microsoft have now changed it from that screen that you saw to a modern one where it asks for a username first, password separately, and things like that. But because the phishing attacks are getting so clever and so good, it's quite easy to realize that will fool a lot of people within an organization. So that's an example of a very good phishing attack that we created. So then there's ransomware. Again, ransomware is kind of, it's a big one. It's hit a lot of organizations, particularly we know about the NHS situation, how it's spread through there. Still pretty deadly. We're getting better. People are getting better at combating it. But ultimately, as is ever in the cybersecurity game, is it's attack and defense. So you're always coming up with ways of defending something. And again, the thing that we tend to do is we try and look for ways around those defenses. So for example, we use techniques to evade antivirus by manipulating a file and changing the way it works. So ransomware viruses are, fairly common. There are tips that you can do. Don't run as admins. Don't be running Windows systems as admins. Make sure you're running as a non-admin user. And if administrative tasks need to be done, that you use a separate admin account for that. That helps. We also do things like group policy and script so that temporary folder locations don't have executable permissions at all. So if you're going to be setting up a piece of software, you're going to put that in, it's going to go in a program files or something like that. If it goes into your downloads folder or your desktop or something like that, then just deny access for executables whatsoever, because then the flyby downloads and things like that people use, it mitigates those risks as well. You can use things like App Locker as well in a Windows domain environment to try and limit what programs can run, so that there's only approved programs that can actually run. Also, email filtering. Most ransomware comes via email. So email filtering is still pretty important, and make sure that that's detecting anything coming through. But again, wherever there's a defense, there's a new type of attack. So just to point out, how clever it's got. You know that people are sending links through as opposed to sending attachments nowadays, because then the attachment doesn't get scanned. So then what a lot of these filters are now doing is they scan the links that take you somewhere to download a file. The attackers have got clever, particularly like Office 365, which is becoming the market leader for email services in businesses. So now what they're doing is sharing the files in OneDrive, because Microsoft trusts OneDrive. So they're attaching the malicious files in OneDrive, sending a link to a OneDrive link, because then it bypasses the filters. So it's getting, wherever there's a defense, there's a new type of attack. So, user education is also really important, which we'll come on to. So mitigating steps. I say security is a bit like an onion. You need layers, you need to do the layered approach. I also kind of compare it to a house security, building security. And I always say, when I was younger, making me sound old, but when I was younger and people didn't lock their front doors. I walked into family members' houses where you just walked in at any time. Would people do that today? Probably not. People tend to lock the door as soon as they walk in, because if they leave the car keys on the side, people walk in, grab the car keys, and then run off with the car. So the landscape of security and physical security for houses and things like that, and buildings, has changed massively, and people have changed their mentality over time. What seems to have happened with cybersecurity is the landscape's changed, the threat landscape has changed, but people are still thinking they can apply the same techniques that they were using 10, 15 years ago. But we can't. We've got to step the game up. We've got to add additional layers of security in as well. Like I said, mail filtering. Don't want to teach granny to suck eggs. I'm sure everyone's using some sort of mail filtering appliance. We have our own kind of mail filtering service that we use. Only 20% of email that we see go through that is actually genuine. The rest is spam, viruses, phishing, those kind of things. User testing and training. Okay, so for those of you, again, I'm dealing with mainly IT professionals, so the audience is probably slightly different to some of the others I've spoken in front of. So to let everyone know, I don't know, or show of hands if you've come across Know Before as a business. Anyone heard of Know Before? Okay, a couple of years. Know Before, we use a platform. We use a managed platform through Know Before. And the reason I'm telling you it's Know Before is you can go on and you can find some of the services. There's a lot of things, if you go on and have a look at Know Before, there's a lot of tools that you'll find really, really useful as IT admins and IT professionals. For example, there is a weak password detector. So you can run against your Active Directory domain, you can run a weak password detection utility, which will tell you all of the users within your Active Directory and which users have weak passwords. So which ones would be easily cracked. And you can also put in your email address for the domain, and it can tell you if any passwords have been breached historically and things like that. But we use KnowBe4 to provide a managed service for cybersecurity training and also phishing. So we basically send phishing emails into the organization. We're good at it. We create quite good phishing emails, and we know what works for certain industry types and things like that. So we send phishing emails in. It's then reported back to us as to how many people, what percentage of people clicked the links, how many people entered some data. We also occasionally send them a USB pen drive through the post with things like financial data on. And if they plug that into a computer and open the document, it then reports back to us that that's been triggered. So we basically, like I was saying earlier about ethical hacking, we try to do the things that hackers are doing. And then we can report on that to the business so that you know what the state of play is and whether additional training is required and for who, things like that. So our product. So KnowBe4 is the platform that we use. We branded it as a managed service and we call it Jellyfish. That's my little plug. I won't plug many things, but that's the one service I'll probably plug. Antivirus, again, have antivirus. Make sure you're looking at antivirus providers who have behavioral analysis as opposed to just traditional signature-based AV. Most of them are kind of caught up now and are using behavior analysis as well. But test it as well. This is the other thing. Get some viruses, write some code. PowerShell scripts are a good example. A lot of the techniques that we use for ethical hacking are PowerShell scripts to try and bypass things and steal information and inject backdoors. Write yourself a PowerShell script and see if it gets through. There's also clever things that we've done in the past with shortcut files. So if you were to send somebody a file or give somebody a file, and it's a traditional one is a Word document or an Excel document with macros enabled, where you open it and it says you need to run macros in order to see the invoice or whatever it is that you sent. We've actually written file in a shortcut, so it's just a link, like a link to a file, where you code the content of the file into the link and you put a backdoor script in it. Again, you would double click the file, it would open up as an invoice, it would look exactly like an invoice. And in the background, it's run a PowerShell script, which has injected things into the machine. So again, that's how subtly, with a bit of clever code writing, you can get files through the back door. Patch management, obviously, again, mentioned the NHS and ransomware. I'm sure you're all aware that Microsoft had brought a patch out. So the ransomware that ran in the case of the NHS could have been far less damaging than it was had it not exploited a vulnerability within Windows that had been patched 2 to 3 months prior. So again, patch management, the reason it's so critical to get security updates and patches applied as quickly as possible is because, as hackers, ethical or not, what we do is when there's a security update or a security patch, we install it. First we read the notes. Why was this released? Okay, what was it to fix? Then we run the patch, but when we run the patch, we analyze exactly what it's changing and doing on the system, reverse engineer it, and actually find what the problem was. So this is the issue. As soon as a security patch or a security update is released, it is telling millions and millions of hackers how to exploit that system. And that's how critical it is. That's why, the organizations that don't patch very quickly, that's why they'll get done over, because the publishers and the vendors are literally telling everybody how to exploit the system or how to get around security and things like that. So 9 ways to steal a password. And while I'm talking about these techniques, so you might be thinking, right, that's just, loads of people sat with loads of bits of code and, really deep firewall hacking and things like that. No, most of this is stuff that by the end of it, I reckon, most of you could do at least 60% of the things that we're going to talk about straight away. You could walk out of here and do most of these things yourself. Not that I'm trying to teach a load of hackers, by the way, to go and steal passwords. However, it does make you realise. It does start to make you realise how vulnerable your passwords are, really. So public hotspots, Wi-Fi hacking, and things like that. So for anyone who's noticed on the phone, I've titled it very obviously so that I don't inadvertently capture anything, but I've got a Wi-Fi network called Wi-Fi hacking demo. If you were to look at that on your phone, it will come up with the. Has anyone done that? Has anyone connected to it? By the way, everyone got scared. Did it come up with a? Did it come up with a portal? Right.
Should have called it NSA scan.
Yeah. So again, I like to make it obvious so I don't inadvertently steal anything, and people can know that. And if you do want to do it at the end or whatever, if you want to talk to me about it, and I can show you how quickly and easily I can change portals. But the idea is that there's a few attacks so that's using this Wi-Fi pineapple. I'll tell a quick little tidbit. I was in, and you'll see later on there's some images from New York. Whenever I go on holiday, my missus loves me because I go on holiday, I take my camera bag with a whole load of hacking toolkits in there, just purely because I'm like, my downtime on holiday is when I'm then thinking of different things I can do and techniques and things like that. So she loves me because I take a load of tools and then I sit there coding things and trying new things out, and she sits there sunbathing. But well, I was in New York on a cruise recently, and whilst I was away, they announced, I don't know if anyone heard about it on the news, the Russian 3 or 4 Russian hackers in, I think it was Switzerland or something, near a chemical plant or something like that. And they were basically trying to do a close encounter attack. And they've seized all the evidence of what equipment they had, and sure enough, this device was amongst the evidence. And I'm like I'm in Canada or in America with one of these thinking, and Russian hackers had just been locked up. And I'm thinking, oh God, I hope they don't actually check this and then think I'm doing anything malicious. But that's the Wi-Fi pineapple. And some of the techniques and attacks you can do with the Wi-Fi pineapple, one is create a bit of a man-in-the-middle attack. So, I pretend I'm Starbucks or, any other coffee shop, McDonald's or whatever, and I get people in public areas, hotels are a great example, you get people to connect to it. And you don't do anything besides let them access the internet. So you tether to your 4G or tether via cable to your mobile phone, give them access over the internet on 4G, and then it just means all traffic that's going back and forth to the internet then goes through the Wi-Fi pineapple. So then you can do packet captures, analysis, and things like that. Now, problem with that, that worked great 5 years ago because there was less and less encrypted connections, but now most of the internet is going to HTTPS. There's been a big push by Google, which has been good because it's pushed everyone to get to HTTPS. So there's less actual readable traffic that goes through on a man-in-the-middle attack nowadays. So other techniques that hackers can use to try and steal a bit of information is we could do a DNS attack. So we watch the traffic. So DNS will always know in plain text what sites you're accessing. So if we can watch your traffic for a little bit and see that you're logging on to certain sites, could be Facebook, Office 365, Gmail, whatever, then we could start injecting or changing DNS records to try and point you at a different location, okay? And if we can do that, we can then spoof the page. So we clone the Google sign-in page, we clone that, present it to you as if you're going to Google, but it's not, okay? So that's one way of doing it. Another one, the simple setup I've got at the moment is portal pages. So if you've so at the moment it's on cloud. So if you were to sign into the Wi-Fi hacking wireless, depends if you're using Android or like a Samsung or an iPhone. iPhones tend to pop up the page straight away as soon as whether it detects the internet or not. Samsung devices and most Android devices don't. You have to go onto the web browser before the pop-up will come up, and that's purely the Android device checks for actual internet first. But anyway, in either case, most people, when they connect to a public Wi-Fi, know that they've opened a browser page so they can get access to it. And on this particular example, it comes up with a cloud portal. Anyone connected to the cloud before, the cloud Wi-Fi, the blue banner? And so it comes up with that, and it looks exactly like the cloud portal. And the thing is, if you put username and password in, that's your username and password captured for that. And then someone might say, well, who cares? What are you going to do? Sign into some public hotspot as me on the cloud? That's not going to really that's not going to damage me. But the question is, do you use the same password for your cloud account that you do, other email accounts and things like that? And just of a point of interest, because I've done this and tested it, the cloud username and password, when you registered for the cloud, you actually have to put in first name, surname, date of birth, email address, choose a security question and answer. You've probably even forgotten that you did that, but actually now I can sign into the cloud as you and get your security question and answer. I can get your address, telephone number, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to piece together good things that I can use to help promote another attack. And that's just simply just cloning the cloud portal and nothing much more than that. I have also, like I say at the end, I'll flick between them, but I've cloned like the Premier Inn Wi-Fi login, which actually asks for card details to get premium access and things like that. So I've cloned that. I've got various different sites and stuff. That I did one which was just basically the Google page, and I kind of do it as, sign in with your Google account. So again, people might put the Google account in thinking that's how they access the Wi-Fi, and you've stolen their Google details. So it gives you a bit of an idea. This is kind of a little bit out of date now. I've put WPA2 encryption. That's not true anymore. So everyone knows that WEP was hacked easily. It could be cracked easily with a little bit of data. WPA2 has now also been cracked. You now need WPA3 if you want to have assured security for a little bit longer until someone cracks that. So yeah, but don't use WEP. WPA2. My point is, if you want something to be secure, just don't use wireless. Is the thing. And if you are going to use wireless, separate it. Use VLANs or use segregation or something to keep it separate from other things. So yeah. That point. Remove unknown. So if you've connected to a public Wi-Fi in the past on your phone, the other thing that this device does is whenever you've connected to a public Wi-Fi or any Wi-Fi, it beacons for that Wi-Fi. So your device will constantly be shouting Starbucks, cloud, whatever. It'll constantly be shouting those names. So in terms of intelligence gathering and things, this device can also be put into a mode. If I could flick it to a mode where it will just all of a sudden tell me every single Wi-Fi that you've all connected to. Because your phone, while the Wi-Fi is on, and on some phones, even while it's switched off, it constantly beacons that information out. So if you've connected to a free Wi-Fi that doesn't require a password or a security key, when you're done, if you are going to use it, when you're done, remove it afterwards as well. And if you are in public Wi-Fi areas and things, try not to do anything of any sensitive nature. Browsing the web for a few answers to recipes is fine, but I wouldn't do anything major on a public Wi-Fi. So, man-in-the-middle attack, that's kind of like the example. So I was talking about a Wi-Fi man-in-the-middle attack where I get somebody to connect to that and then I get their internet traffic so I can watch the internet traffic. It doesn't just have to be on Wi-Fi. You can do a cable-based man-in-the-middle attack. I'm getting a bit techie here now, but I'm with some techies, so I don't mind saying it. Using like an ARP spoofing attack, an ARP poisoning attack. Old-fashioned attack used to work great for listening to VoIP calls and things like that on a network. So I'd plug my laptop in. I would do an ARP poisoning attack, which would basically take, let's say I am trying to listen into a VoIP call. It would take the voice over IP phone. It would tell the phone that I'm the router using a MAC address, and then it would tell the router that I'm the phone. So all traffic then passes through my laptop or my device, and then I can just packet capture it, listen back to the VoIP calls. So man in the middle is possible. Again, there are some mitigating steps you can use against that. You can have switches that detect for ARP poisoning attacks. You can put software in that detects ARP poisoning attacks. You can limit MAC addresses to certain ports on switches and things. So there's a number of techniques you can use to defend against that, but it's quite a simple one if you want to try and watch traffic going through. And social engineering. So social engineering is the act of gaining more information or intelligence from somebody by wording something in a certain way to make you divulge more than you probably should. The classic at the moment, I've just heard on the news the other day that a ring in, I don't know if it's in India or something, a ring of hackers have been found for making these bogus calls and saying, hi, we're calling from Microsoft or whoever, whichever else company they want to pretend they are. We need to deploy an important update on your machine. Can you, I'll talk you through getting me on, like we do as IT professionals. We'll gain access to somebody's system, but they're all doing that and pretending that they're helping out. I always joke that we're a Microsoft partner. If you tried contacting they don't, they're not that forthcoming at giving you loads of information. So it's a bit too good to be true if they start ringing around every single person in the world asking to help out with their computer. I also say about, if I wanted to get somebody's username and password, the thing is, if people use the same username and password for multiple for multiple things. If I was to ask Martin directly, Martin, what's your password? You're probably not going to tell me. He probably wouldn't tell me to either question because he's well trained on this. However, but you know, if you word something slightly different, Martin, I'm going to set up a great fancy football league and you should definitely be part of it. I'll get you signed up. Just need, choose a username and password or an email address and choose a password and I'll set it up for you. Yeah. So asking the question slightly differently, to people who maybe wouldn't think about it might just, use this password for it. Not thinking that they probably repeat the same password multiple times. And then you get like online kind of social engineering things, these banners and stuff that come on saying, you've got 6,000 infections, install this software so that we can sort it all out for you. It's kind of one of these, it's kind of spoofed stuff. So social engineering. Then key grabber and key logging. Now it's a shame, when I do this talk in a business, I'll tend to have something set up to demonstrate this. Now, I've been talking about key logging and key grabbing software and hardware for years, right, in terms of a security threat. And then I talk about the fact you can get them that are Wi-Fi. And I've said it a number of times in front of people, but I thought, sod it. While I was in New York, I ordered one so that I could actually demonstrate it. So this is a wireless keylog, USB keylogger, okay? Dead simple. You plug it into a machine in any kind of public area. So you get into a meeting room where somebody's got a PC controlling a screen or something like that, which typically the IT admins are the ones that go and set this up. So if I can get this in, plug it in subtly behind because I've got 10 seconds, and then plug the keyboard in, I then connect. This works as a wireless access point as well. So I then connect my phone to this. It could be outside the building by this point, and just watch. Or I could have it automatically email me as long as I can connect it to a working Wi-Fi. But typically, I could just go and collect the information from the keylogger because it stores the data in here, and all I need to do is connect over Wi-Fi to the keylogger and just read everything that's been typed in to that machine. So it's as simple as that. Again, the theme of this thing is it's not that difficult to steal somebody's password. Plugging that in and waiting for somebody to log in. People hate me in the offices because we're on our toes for security, but if anyone does anything, I try and hack them. So if they leave their machine unlocked, or even if they leave their machine vacant, I tend to plug this in and see if they check anything. So, they hate me. My missus hates me. My co-workers hate me. There's a bit of a theme to it.
Well, that's really. USB, isn't it? Now, how many businesses disable USB?
Yeah, but you can't. You can't disable the keyboard.
Right. Okay. So it identifies as a keyboard.
This doesn't actually. We tested this. So I had another IT manager that had the same theory. Oh well, it'll come as a different signature. It doesn't. Literally, the keyboard plugs into this. This plugs into the computer. It passes straight through the keyboard. Doesn't detect it as anything different.
You have two keyboards essentially connected.
No. It passes it straight through.
You put the keyboard into the back of that.
Mm-hmm.
The USB keyboard into the back of that.
Yep. And then straight.
It goes into your laptop.
Yep. Pass through. Key logged. Very difficult to. You can't really do much about that. What you do is physical stuff. So if you've got a meeting, any public areas or things like that, I always joke that I could probably steal the passwords at IKEA because they have a number of PCs sat and they're, as you walk around with the back of the PC perfectly accessible. It's in a little flimsy cage, but you can do that in a few seconds. Physical security is the thing. And also it's just policies and things. If you've got guests, make sure they're escorted through areas, and if there are public areas, make sure things are kind of locked away a little bit so they're not easy to get access to. The thing is, you used to get keyloggers, same sort of thing as this. You'd get a keylogger and it would store all the data on the keylogger, but the person who was doing it would need to access the device twice. With this, if I've got a target that I need to get to and I want to get to them, then I only need physical access to something once to get this in, and that's it. I can capture the passwords. Now, what I will say is passwords are flawed, fundamentally flawed. Typing passwords, you see the information from the National Cybersecurity Centre and stuff like that about making sure that applications allow copying and pasting and things so that you can use password managers to autofill passwords so that people aren't typing passwords in because keyloggers will capture them. Problem, obviously, a lot of people have is, your Windows password, you tend to sign in and type it in. I don't. I use facial recognition on my laptop. I'm looking now at, since Microsoft's announcement last week or last couple of weeks, for FIDO keys and things like that. So biometric, USB, authorization. So you don't put a password in at all. A world of security that's going to work is going to involve scrapping passwords. That's what it's going to involve, because otherwise, 9 easy ways for anybody to steal somebody's password fundamentally makes it difficult. The other option is, which we're going to get onto anyway, is two-factor authentication. That's the other thing as well. You have to put another layer in to protect against it. So, but yeah, that's key grabbers and key loggers. Then you've got browser password revealer. So I'm sure as IT professionals, people have used this tool historically. Anyone used a tool like this before to drag passwords out of the web browser and stuff? So Internet Explorer, Chrome, to be fair to them, in the most recent update have actually prevented at the moment the accessibility for this. Firefox, you could still do it, I believe. Internet Explorer is the worst. Microsoft just announced they've given up as well, haven't they, on Edge? So they've just announced, we can't do it anymore. We're not competing. So yeah, which is interesting because they were always behind. But browser password revealers. A number of times I say to people when they click, they click that, remember my password in the web browser, and I'm like, I could rinse all of your passwords in less than 5 seconds. And that's not saying using this software, because the problem with using this software is you download it, you install it, your antivirus software says it's a virus, so you have to add it to the whitelist, and you've got to do all this. You can't do all that in 5 seconds anyway. However, I'm going to show you a technique that's using this device, my rubber ducky, that will steal all of those passwords in less than 5 seconds and send them off-site, and you won't even know about it. So one word of warning, if anyone still is doing this, do not store passwords in your web browser for convenience. Rather than that, use a reputable password manager. My preference is LastPass. There are others, but use a reputable password manager that will autofill into browsers. But also, this was funny because I did a talk like this at a financial company 2 weeks ago, and they've actually got LastPass Enterprise, and the reason they got LastPass Enterprise was because they wanted to share passwords between people without people knowing the passwords. And sounds like a great idea. They won't know the password. Somebody manages it. They deploy it to them. When they sign in, they just copy and paste. Well, they autofill the password, until I went in and showed them that in a web browser, in Chrome, for example, you can have it autofill the username and password, and whilst it's on the page, you can just go into inspect, go to the text box that says it's a password field, change that to a text field, and it reveals the password. So, you can use tools like that as long as you're aware of the potential pitfalls of it. So don't think you're going to share a password and it's going to stay confidential in that platform, because it doesn't. Shoulder surfing. So I said about me being in New York, and one of the things I love it. You're connected to me on LinkedIn. You'll see these things wherever I'm on a train, I always kind of narrate my train journey, because I'm like, I know all the financial information for this particular business, or I know the password for that particular person. I know what they do and know how they do it, because everyone just whips open their laptops on a train. As soon as somebody's opened their laptop on a train, I know that within the next 30 seconds, they're going to type the password in on that machine. And again, I'm thinking about it from a security perspective, not in a malicious way, but, some people go, well, I'm going to type my password in, but I type it quickly. It's fairly long. It's fairly complex. There's no way you're going to remember all of that as I type it in. And then I always use this for my presentations and go, but everyone's got their phone plastered to their hand while they're on the train, and these are like high definition and ultra high definition cameras that can do super slow-mo and things like that. So who's to say that someone's not going to be stood there, hitting record while they're pretending to send a text message, just capturing exactly what you're typing in into your keyboard? It's not rocket science to steal a password in that manner. And then you can obviously go back through, and frame by frame, you can look at every single character. Simple as that. But shoulder surfing doesn't necessarily mean just being stood right behind somebody or right over the shoulder. So this is my amazing zoom camera that I've got, my Nikon Coolpix P9000 or P900 or something. And it's got a pretty, even though it's quite a compact, digital camera, and that's kind of what it looks like in terms of full zoom, it's pretty impressive. So much so, I'm going to show you some images that were captured from my recent trip to New York. Sounds like I'm bragging. I'm not bragging too much. I was sat, having a drink from a rooftop bar in Manhattan. But I'm sat there again. Mrs. loves me because, I'm sat opposite her. She's just wanting to get another drink. I'm like, look at that building over there. See that building? I reckon I can see a computer over there with the screen unlocked. So I'm going, let me go and grab my camera. So I go back to the room, come back up to the bar. She's like, I'll get another drink then, shall I? So anyway, so I'm sat there. This is the position we are sat in. Okay, looking across an office block in Manhattan, there's loads of them, right? So I'm going, let's see how far I can zoom in on that office over there in the middle. Okay, getting a bit closer. You can clearly, well, not clearly, but you can see there's a couple of monitors, Zoom a bit closer. Yeah, I can see the chair, I can see the back of the picture frames, I can see a TV at the other side of the room now. Closer still. So I can see he's now been to Starbucks, and he's been twice because he's got 2 Starbucks mugs on his desk, and can probably just about make out where he's been shopping as well. Closer still. So now, obviously, the projector's not great for images. This is Outlook open, and the names of the individuals and the subjects that are on the email are clearly visible on this image. And I can also see which business it is, but don't give that away too much. And there's him doing a report, a financial report. So obviously he wasn't in the office at the time when, we were capturing what's on his emails and his inbox. But now I'm just watching him do a financial report for the board of directors for this big organization in Manhattan. So that's how easy shoulder surfing can be done just with a camera. And so it's things like that where people don't, or just to remind you, because what quite often happens is people get to that point and go, how close actually were we? That's where we're sat. Okay, so if you've got, offices with windows and computers with monitors facing out, bear in mind that if there's any space outside that somebody could use, if they wanted to target the business, they could just watch you typing things into the system. So some of the recommendations are, simple things, blinds, one-way glass filter, whatever, filters and things like that. Or just don't have your monitors facing out to the world is another idea. And lock your machine when you walk away from it as well. That's just general best practice. Okay, rubber ducky. So another device. What we're on, number 7. Rubber ducky. So these are, I've got a couple of them. Obviously, they look like USB pen drives. Anyone watch the TV program Mr. Robot? I'll do that. Just you? Is it just you or anyone else? Oh, got a few more. So yeah, this was featured in Mr. Robot episode, if you can remember, the 3 or 4 of you that watched it. So Mr. Robot's about a hacker, kind of rogue, good bad type hacker, and he uses a rubber ducky as a way of penetrating into or trying to get into a police station. So he just drops a few of these outside the police station, writes something quite, interesting on the side of them. One of the police officers picks one up, goes and plugs it into his machine, and it starts to run a script against the machine. Okay, they're designed to look like USB pen drives, but they're not USB pen drives. Similar to your question earlier, though, it's a keyboard. It's a scripted keyboard. So again, the problem you have with detecting and blocking these things is computers trust USB keyboards. Okay, it expects a keyboard to be plugged in. So when you plug this in, it will very quickly install the keyboard driver related to this, and it will inject keystrokes from this. We've done various different scripts, put backdoors and things like that. So like the sticky keys, anyone come across the sticky keys bypass? A great IT admin tool to get into a system if you're locked out of it. You just replace the sethc.exe file with command prompt, or you put it in the registry to replace that. And then if you hit shift 5 times, you get a command prompt that you can then get full system privileges access to a machine. So we've had this to do, if you've got an unlocked machine and you want to get yourself permanent access to that machine, you can plug it in and it can do that quick registry change via PowerShell or command prompt or whatever, as long as the machine's running as admin, which is why it's important not to run machines in admin as well. So you can do that. One of the other techniques that we used for it is to steal all the passwords from the web browser and send that to an offsite server. We actually encode it in base64 first before it sends it offsite. That way the intrusion detection systems won't flag anything obvious that we're taking a load of password data out. To give you an idea of that, I've got a video. So this is the rubber ducky in use on just a test laptop, me plugging in the rubber ducky. And you'll see on screen, it starts to open, it does Windows key R, CMD, opens command prompt, runs a PowerShell script. PowerShell script runs, that was probably about 4 seconds, maybe 3 or 4 seconds to run. That's it. That's all it takes. And then it's basically, this is it again, but as a screen grab. That's it, done. And as soon as that's finished, you just pull it out. On our Kali server, it's posting that information out, encoded, to a file, to a remote file on our machine. We can then decode it via base64, and then you get a list. Obviously, we've pre-filled Internet Explorer with a load of usernames and passwords. We're not going to show you real ones, but you can see a load of test user at pyronet.co.uk and test passwords and stuff. Quick and easy as that. So the other thing I always say to people, we talk about passwords and complexities and things like that. It doesn't matter how good or long or complex your password is if we can just rip it straight off the system and send it to ourselves. Google it. This is my new one. This was my bonus one, okay? Because of the increase that we're seeing of breaches as a direct result of previous breaches. So again, I'm not sure how many of you have kept up with the news and things like that, but there's so many, Marriott Hotels, one of the most recent. I think there's been 3 or 4 major breaches in the last week, but Marriott Hotels was one of the big ones with loads of information that's been stolen. What typically happens is the hackers steal this information, sell it, and it ends up on the internet, okay, on the dark web typically. But just to give you an idea, if you type in username, password, combo list, you'll get, what is that, 3 million password lists and 500,000 password lists. And, you can simply go on the internet and download a list of usernames and passwords that have been stolen. Literally as simple as that. Now, then what's happening is anyone had a extortion type email? We've hacked you. This is a password. This is your password. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're getting contacts from a lot of that as well, where people are scared because, people are emailing them and they're putting the password in the first line, their actual password. And they're claiming to have hacked them, and they will have been hacked for a previous breach. But then these people are using this information they're finding online to make it look more believable when they're telling them that they've been hacked and that they've hacked them. So that's happening. And the other thing is there's a piece of software called Hitman. And what Hitman will do is you can get these millions of username password combo lists. You can run it through an automated piece of software that will basically take each username and password and try it on all common sites. So Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Office 365, it all basically just go and fire that username and password against various different sites that have had, either had breaches or are, big sites that they could access. And then, nobody has to do anything manually. It comes up at the end with a traffic light system of green tick, yep, we got in, or red X, you didn't. So it filters the list down for the hacker to known usernames and passwords and the website associated with what they can log into. All automated. So let's put this in perspective. Hacker goes on the internet, downloads a list, runs it through software. A couple hours later, list of who they can hack. It's as simple as that. It's not complicated at all. And that's why we're seeing a vast increase of breaches, particularly on small and medium businesses and things like that, where it's just previous breaches. Like I say, that know before, it's worth looking at know before because they can not only find leaks from previous password breaches, but they can run that against your Active Directory to see if any of those passwords are still in use by those users. Worth doing as well. And then there's brute force. So now if none of the other 8 things worked, can't get the password any other way, then we can brute force password crack it. Now, typically, that's difficult to do online because you should have a lockout policy. So if we try 3 or 4 passwords, we shouldn't be able to try any more without a delay. But what we could do, particularly where there's a password hash that's sent over a network, if we could take so a hash is essentially a way of kind of encrypting a password and making it check against a verification. But if we can take that information, essentially an encrypted password, then we can crack that at our leisure without, alerting anybody, because once we've got a copy of it, we can do it on our own systems and our own password cracking techniques without you even knowing that we're doing that. Just to put it in perspective of how easy it can be, we had a business where they gave us password hashes of 1,400 users, and we had a 6-hour test. So we have a dedicated box that's got several graphics cards in it to speed up the process, but we had a system that was running for 6 hours total to try and crack as many of these 1,400 passwords as we could. In 2 minutes, we'd cracked over 700 passwords. By 6 hours, we'd cracked over 1,000 of those 1,400 passwords. And the reason it's so quick, especially the 700 in 2 minutes, is that it actually uses a series of techniques. So it will use a dictionary list, so known passwords that have been hacked before, or common passwords and things like that. It will use those, but then it will also do what humans have been taught to do with passwords, such as letter number substitution. So it'll take an O in each of these words and change it for a 0. It'll take an I and change it for a 1. It'll take an A and change it for an at or a 4. And it'll basically do all of these substitutions in milliseconds that humans have been told how to create passwords. So that's why it's so quick and easy for it to steal so many passwords. So mitigating steps. What am I like for time?
It depends on the hashing algorithm, doesn't it?
Not really, no. No, as long as it was.
MD5 crack very crackable, but AES is a lot harder.
Yes, but you've got things like rainbow tables. So if you've got any pre-populated, pre-cracked passwords, which gets easier and easier because so many of them have been cracked, you can run it against rainbow tables. It will recognize a hash against a previously cracked password, which mitigates it reduces the time massively for cracking. Again, like I say, passwords are easy to crack.
We've got just over 20 minutes.
Okay.
With obviously a little bit of time included in that for some questions.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Right, so some mitigating steps. Again, some of these, I'd say I don't want to kind of go to death because they're kind of obvious to a lot of people. But if people do want more information on some of this stuff, if they feel I'm glazing over it a bit quickly, then just ask questions. This is the most important one anyway. This is the one that ultimately everybody needs to kind of buy into and go, yes, that's what we need to do. So at the moment, like I said earlier, I think passwords are fundamentally flawed. I don't think they work anymore. What we're in at the moment is we're in a bit of a transition period between, that's the only thing we've got for certain applications and certain ways of working. We've only got usernames and passwords. And until we get to something that replaces that, we have to do something else because there's too many easy ways of stealing those passwords. That something else that you put in between at the moment is two-factor authentication. So no, it's been around for the banks for years because otherwise too many people would have had their bank accounts broken into. Is everyone familiar with two-factor authentication? Heard of two-factor authentication? So it's the premise of having something else to verify your identity, whether that's like a card reader, like a one-time passcode for your bank, or one-time passcode off your phone. The ones I prefer are text message two-factor authentication. Lots of security experts are going, we can fool you with that because we could fish for it afterwards and things. It's still better than nothing, to be honest. I would still say if your option is text-based two-factor authentication or no two-factor authentication, then you choose text-based. But I prefer the ones that are push notification based on phones, something where you're being told that you've just signed in and you have to approve that. The reason I prefer that one, and similarly with text-based, not that I prefer that, is that push notification shows you if you've had a breach. So if you're walking down the street doing your shopping one day and you get a pop-up for a two-factor authentication because you sign into whatever your email account, your Google email account or Office 365 account, then straight away if you haven't signed in, you know somebody's stolen your username and password, because that wouldn't come up if someone was trying to break into your account and got your username and password wrong. It will only come up if someone knows your username and password. So it acts as an early warning system to, you've had a breach and you need to do something about it. And so passwords. So we've been talking to death about passwords. And like I say, fundamentally, I don't think passwords are actually, good enough anymore. But you're going to have to live with them for a little bit longer, I think. So make your password a good one. Not password, make your passwords a good, a good set of passwords. Now, I don't agree entirely with this, okay? We put it up there kind of to prove a point. Well, to kind of suggest that you're better off having a longer password than a smaller, complex password. But this gets to the point where it says things like, where is it? It reckons that would take 6 years to crack. I adamantly say that's not true. We cracked passwords very similar to that, and it took us less than 2 minutes to crack. But the point is, get longer passwords are better than shorter, more complex passwords. Yeah, but that's purely based on brute force. That's purely based on brute force. But like I say, the password cracking techniques that you use aren't just solely brute force now. It's a combination of rainbow tables, hybrid attacks, dictionary attacks, and brute force all combined into one. Which means, and obviously the thing is, we're talking about how quickly we can crack it with our 2 or 3 graphics cards using the processing power. But processing power is getting better and better and better. And there's this whole thing about quantum computing and how encryption is going to be really difficult because you'll be able to crack encryption keys because computing is going to get faster. So, like I say, passwords have had their day, but we just need to put stop gaps in for the time being. So how do you do that? How do you create good passwords that I say to people, I'm going to take this off screen in a second. I say to people, have a good password or have good passwords that are complicated, that are long. You don't use the same password for everything, and then people say to me, well, that's impossible, Joe. How am I supposed to do that? Well, there's 2 ways. Password manager, and just have it completely random, completely randomly generated, and store it in a password manager with a very good password, and hope that and use 2-factor authentication for your password manager, and just hope that nobody ever breaches and somehow gets the encryption key and decrypts everything. Or you have a formula to how you can create really good passwords for everything and remember them easily. So that's what this is. So first off, you have to come up with a complex base password, okay? So this base password is something that you're going to use with everything. And I always say a nice idea is an address. Maybe, your first address you lived in, or your parents' address, or whatever, but a work address. Maybe not your current address, because might be easily guessed. Not that when we do all this, it's going to be very easy to crack. But the reason I think addresses are quite good is typically they start with a number, then you have a street name, and typically you could write a street name as you would do normally. So let's say it was Chester Road, you'd put a capital C for your Chester, and you put a capital R for your road. So now you've got number, uppercase, lowercase, and yet it's still something that is really easy to type, really familiar to type, wouldn't take you long. It's not like you're going, did I use an E or a 3? You just, you write it as normal. Then stick your postcode at the end of it, or the postcode for the address at the end of it as well, because again, it's relatively a random set of letters and numbers as well. So that can become a base password, right? Then what you want to do is you need unique passwords for every single application, everything you do. But you've got to remember them all. So we could use part of the application or website that you're logging into to create the password. So for example, Amazon starts with an A, eBay starts with an E, Skype starts with an S, although Skype's just been replaced on it now with Teams. I need to update this and put Teams. So yeah, you could use part of one of the letters or 2 of the letters from the word. It could be the first letter and the last letter, or the first 2 letters. The formula is kind of up to you, but this is trying to give you a way of working. And then I do quite like, so the one thing, if I steal a load of passwords from your web browser and there's a list and I've got your Amazon one, it says A something, and I've got your eBay one, it says E something, as a fairly switched on hacker, I'll be like, yeah, I think I know what's going on here. So, mix it up with something else as well. But the one I quite like is like the number of syllables in the word because it's not a visually recognizable thing. So, Amazon 3, eBay 2, and Skype 1. So you could use that, and it's still very quick. You say the word in your head, and you've got a number, okay, as a direct result of you saying the word in your head. And you stick that number in the password as well. So then and then just stick a symbol in just for good measure. But then you end up with something like that. So you could end up with, for Amazon, you could end up with A3, A3, I shouldn't use 3 Farrington Way because this always confuses me and I use the number twice. A3 Farrington Way, NG16 3BF, stick your 3 for Amazon in your 3 syllables and a question mark at the end or whatever you want. So then all of a sudden every single website, every single login is unique, but easy to remember and pretty easy to type because, it's pretty fluid. Muscle memory kicks in and you've typed that address before, so it makes it easier and quicker to type. Although that said, you shouldn't be typing it in because I'll keylogger it, so you should be using a password manager anyway to enter it. Guess Wi-Fi, pretty obvious one. Everyone should be pretty familiar with this by now, is that if people are coming in off the street and need Wi-Fi access, then you give it as guest Wi-Fi. It should be segregated from the rest of the network. And it should expire. I tend to do code-based stuff so that they can't have permanent access to the guest Wi-Fi just because they've visited once. It should expire after a period of time. Other things to do with encryption, laptops and portable devices should be encrypted. Again, pretty standard stuff at the moment. For Windows devices, with Windows 10, BitLocker's fine. You can group policy manage it now as well, so it keeps the backup keys and Active Directory and stuff as well. Encrypt USB hard drives and pen drives which hold confidential data or just don't use them. Ensure any backup media is always encrypted before it goes off-site. Some of this old-fashioned backup software that's existing that people are still using, like Semantic Backup Exec and things like that, it's just so behind the times when it came to backup media. And then physical security. This is the other thing. If something, like server encryption, again, is possible. It's if things are, out of date and you haven't got TPM chips on board and you haven't got the capability to encrypt servers, then, back to standard best practice, make sure it can't be physically stolen. So it's, locked down, locked to a cabinet, wired to a cabinet and things like that. So, and then obviously most servers come with fronts, lockable fronts, so you can't just pull disks out of them and things like that as well. Encryption while you're browsing the web. Like we said earlier, that's good that a lot more websites are now HTTPS. Anyone heard of, again, kind of more of an IT community, Let's Encrypt? Anyone using Let's Encrypt? Okay, a few nods. Let's Encrypt's great now for encryption to make things nice and easy for web server encryption and things. And the good thing about Let's Encrypt is you can automate it to great for certificates as well, because you can rehash your certificates every 3 months easily without, manually running anything. So, that's really good to keep on top of security, make sure you're in HTTPS. And that came from, Google and Facebook not wanting to keep manually doing it. Authorization, again, this is more policy-based stuff, but some of it will sound obvious, but some of it might go, oh, actually, yeah. Only give people access to things they need to do their job. Don't give them access to things they don't need. Another thing on that, actually, again, while we're in a bit of an IT community, is access-based enumeration on Windows file servers, if people are still using Windows file servers as opposed to SharePoint and other things like that. But so the feature from Windows 2008, I think it came in, called access-based enumeration. No one heard of that? Are you aware of it? It hides files that you don't have permission for. Dead simple, but actually, a lot of people don't have that enabled by default. So what happens is users, as they're going through and they've got access to a folder structure, will see a folder called finance and they'll double click it and it might say access denied. But you've actually created an interest there because they're like, oh, why do I not have access to that finance folder? Maybe if I go on another computer, they'll have access to that finance folder. So you've created intrigue as to what that folder is and why they haven't got access to it. Access-based enumeration is a very simple thing. If they don't have access to it, it doesn't appear in the folder structure. Quite useful. So yeah, don't give people access to things they don't need. When a user leaves, make sure there's a procedure followed to relinquish permissions for things. Always try and give the individual an account for everything as opposed to creating group accounts. So people where they have one account for a supplier website, for example, that's a bit of a nightmare to manage and audit, and like the audit trail and things like that. If each user's got their own unique ID, then you can just expire that user when they leave, and there's an audit trail for what's happened. Ideally, single sign-on. Single sign-on would be great. I'd love for single sign-on to work in an ideal world for everything. It doesn't yet in a lot of things, but when we get there, when we get to a point where everything can be authenticated once and gives people access to what they need, that'd be great. Obviously, like I said earlier, make sure that people don't run as admins on the machine. Also, anybody who have got administrator type privileges, make sure definitely they've got cybersecurity training done and social engineering training done. At least those, but typically I'd suggest everybody in the organization should have it anyway. So I think a few are already connected to me on LinkedIn, but if you're not, then I do post quite a lot of content on LinkedIn, particularly when I'm going to do actually a video with Superfast Business Wales in the next few days about the boom of password breaches appearing online and how that's being used and stuff. So I tend to put a lot of content on LinkedIn. If you want to follow me or connect to me on there, I appreciate it. We also have a Twitter account that we use and post to, and you can find us on Facebook as well. Thank you.